Hello, this will be a video on how to make a homemade protective mask with face shield. Our nation is currently in a critical shortage of protective equipment for our first responders and healthcare professionals. And this will be an idea to introduce a concept how you can make a mask, a protective mask out of some common household items. Now, this mask has not been clinically tested. I made a previous video on an earlier version, and I said there was a homemade N95 mask. There's no proof that they'll have the same equivalent level of protection as commercially available masks. This is simply meant to introduce a concept. The CDC has told medical professionals and first responders that they don't have proper commercially available protective equipment to wear a bandana or scarf. This is just a concept to introduce to the public to, if you are in that situation, you maybe have some other options. I'm gonna go ahead and show you what you need to make this mask. I used a 8.5-inch paper plate. This one was made by Dixie and it's called Ultra. I bought this at Costco it was 186 of them for about $18. It's just a normal everyday paper plate. Be careful when you buy the plates or had the plates. I bought several hundred of one version that had this like fibrous material that every time you put a bead of glue down, it peeled back and the material went with it. I'm sure that mask or that plate is great for decomposing and for the environment, but it's not good for making masks. So this is an everyday common plate, just normal weight, not any heavy duty. I used a clear Solo cup. This was 18-ounce cup that I bought at Target. Again, brand doesn't matter. Obviously being clear and transparent matters. They do make some yellow and red and green transparent cups, but for obvious reasons, clear makes the most sense. You're gonna need some kind of foam. Now this is some weather stripping that I bought at Lowe's. It's about 1/4 inch thick. A spool of 17 feet of this costs $2.88. This foam or something equivalent is very important for getting a proper seal in the mask. You're gonna need some wire. I bought some baling wire from Home Depot or Lowe's. This is typically in the concrete section. It's used for holding rebar in place when you're pouring concrete, but it has a variety of construction and farm applications. A big spool here was about $6. You're gonna need some filter media. Now I'm just gonna show you 2 examples. There's dozens and dozens of things that can be used. I'm not sure which is better or worse. I do not make masks for a living. I'm just showing you things that I had available that make sense to me. If you choose to make this mask for yourself or a loved one or a friend, you need to work on what makes sense for you guys. So I just used everyday loose gauze from a first aid kit. And I also used an abdominal bandage that I had in a first aid kit. You're gonna need a straight edge. You're gonna need a pair of scissors, a hot glue gun, a stapler, and a utility knife. Let me go ahead and go through the concept of operations before I show you how to make it. So the way you make this mask is you fold the paper plate in a manner that creates a cavity. And that cavity has that loose gauze filter membrane. If you look into the mask, you're gonna see a bunch of holes. The idea is that as a person wears this mask, they're gonna breathe through those holes and it's gonna go through this gauze and hopefully help filter out any kind of particulate or any kind of virus. Now, I mentioned the second filter medium. I just put this on the inside of this mask, therefore a person breathes through this, the holes, the loose gauze, in and out of that cavity. The face shield is simply the Solo cup cut out and glued and stapled to the mask. These people are concerned with having spray and coughing from people with COVID-19. This will help protect the individual's face. So that's the concept of operation. I'll go through a lot of these features as I go, but I just wanted to show you how it works big picture. So what I did was I took the plate, and again, this is just one design, this is a concept. You can figure out what works for you or your loved ones. This is just gonna introduce things for you to think about and give you options. I made a horizontal line across the plate from the 9 o'clock to the 3 o'clock position. I drew a perpendicular line from the 12 o'clock position to center, and I arbitrarily made lines from about the 4:30 mark and the 7:30 mark. So positions on the references on the clock corresponding on this plate. There's a curved line right here. This curved line, I'll show you in a little bit what it's for, but that's going to end up being the bridge of the mask that's going to be formed around a person's nose and mouth. This pattern right here is going to be the holes that are going to be made, and that will be that holes that I just showed you in the mask where the air is going to flow in and out as a person breathes. So this is the template. You make it on the actual mask that's going to become the paper plate that's going to become the mask. So what you do is you're going to cut from the 12 o'clock position down the center. You're going to poke the holes from that pattern. Now that pattern these holes are just a pattern that I've developed from days of trial and error trying to make this mask most efficient. It's about a pinky's width off the 9 o'clock line, and again about a pinky's width off the 12 o'clock line. This is not precise. This is not rocket science. This is just trying to get a ballpark. What I would suggest is loosely follow this pattern, and then when you start making your own mask, see what makes sense for you and adjust. So you cut the line down, you cut the pattern for the holes, and also cut tabs to that curved line that I just showed you. That's going to become the bridge of the mask that goes over the nose. What you're going to want to do, I mentioned that baling wire. I took a 4-inch piece of the baling wire, and I'm going to loosely hold it to that curved line. This does not have to be precise. Originally, I was using this like little mustache-shaped wire. It's not really necessary. The point is you put a little bit of a curve on it, and you're going to hot glue it across that line you made. And just as a point of reference, you want it to be about middle of that quadrant right there. So put some hot glue, you fold it over, and again, this is going to be the top of the mask where it goes over your nose. This is an example of what that looks like. So I got these glued down, and you're just going to, like I said, hot glue gun, put a dab down, fold it in place, and hold it. You can work your way all the way down. As you can see now, that this mask with that wire embedded can be bent and formed. So the way that this mask comes together, again, after you have the baling wire or whatever wire you were able to use secured in with glue, and you have your line cut from the 12 o'clock line, you're going to take the corner that you cut with the holes in, and you're going to rotate it around to approximately that 4:30 mark. The other side, the other part where you cut, gets rotated around to approximately that 7:30 mark. And as you can see, that's that cavity that I showed you that holds that gauze. Now, a couple things. When you're bending it, it's good to kind of break the creases on the plate before you bend it. It makes it a little easier to work with. And what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to put a bead of hot glue all the way down this inside edge to the end. So when you bring it around to that 4:30 position, and you want to hold it in place, hold it all the way in, and that'll help form a seal. If you don't put a line of glue along that edge, you could bypass the filter and let air kind of go in and out. Another thing is, as you make these, depending on how you cut it, there might be a hole at the bottom of the cone. It just depends on how you cut it. Sometimes I have the hole, sometimes I don't. Bottom line is you want to make sure that if you have a hole, put some glue in there to hold it in place. And also, when you're having this mask come together, now's the time where you're going to place that loose gauze or whatever filter media you have available. What I do is I loosely form it into about a triangle, and I'm going to hold it over the holes that I made along that 7:30 line. So when you fold that arm over, you're going to have that pocket formed with that gauze. And you're going to have to mess around with it. And again, this is just the concept, so this is not, there may be a much better, easier way of doing this. I'm just trying to introduce the concept so people who are in this situation where they don't have proper medical equipment and protection, they can have a few options out there. So as you can see, there's a shell within a shell right here, but hopefully you can see that's kind of starting to take the form of a mask. So again, with the shell within a shell, and now it's a little better. You know, when you bring it over, now's a good time to form it around the contour of the nose and the face, or whoever's going to wear it happens. Originally, I was saying we can mass produce these and drop them off at hospitals. I've heard the hospitals are not accepting homemade protective equipment, and for obvious reasons. You know, they don't have any way of doing quality control. What I would suggest is if you or a loved one or a friend might be in a situation where they're going to be exposed and do not have proper protective equipment, you work with them and make a mask that fits and works best for them. There are a lot of options with doing this. It's just one concept. So again, the shell within a shell, what you do is you cut some slits, take your hot glue gun, and you're going to fold it in place and hold it. Now, I'm going to try and show you some tricks while I'm doing this. I've been making many of these things, and every time I make it, I seem to have, learn a few more things. If you have some of these kind of paper clamps, those are excellent to hold down the tabs when the glue's set in. Another thing, I had mentioned a stapler for supplies. When you bring that over with the hot glue, put a staple in there too. These masks are, they're naturally going to want to unfold, and glue's great, but if you don't have a good seal or your glue's not that strong, that staple is really going to help fold it in place. So as you can see, I have staples on both sides. Also notice that the staples are facing out with the prongs. Anyone who's ever worn a mask or been scraped with a staple, it's pretty annoying. So have the prongs facing out. And also another trick is when you use the staples, go ahead and hit it with a pair of pliers to really crimp down those staple prongs so they're in place. I'm just using a household stapler. This is nothing special, nothing heavy duty. A lot of times the staples aren't really going fully seating on the back side. So again, mask within a mask, cut your tabs, glue them in place and staple if you can over, and then now you're gonna start putting that mask. Now it's gonna start really looking like a mask. All right, so here's a version that's more complete. Again, you can see hopefully that all those tabs were held over, they're glued. I put staples in there, especially on these corners that are gonna wanna peel back. Now here's another feature. If the mask that you're making feels a little too big, especially under your chin, you can just kind of crimp it in the bottom and throw a couple staples there to kind of cinch it up to your face. So it really is meant to, make this for somebody and make sure it works for that person. Nothing's stopping you from mass producing them, and I think the healthcare professionals are going to say something's better than nothing. But again, there's going to be a lot of variances with this. And just because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. The idea here is to just introduce concepts. All right, so as you can see now, it's looking pretty much like a mask. Now, there's one thing that's really important. I mentioned about that bridge with the wire. The next thing that's really important is that weather stripping foam or equivalent. Now, I say equivalent because I'm going to show you a couple different options, but I'm going to show you the foam right now because it seems to be pretty easy and it's cheap. Okay, so as you can see, I took approximately a 13-inch piece of that foam and I just put it around the perimeter of the mask. Now, you can see here, I doubled this strip up. And that's because when I made this particular mask, I was getting some bypass airflow when I was wearing it. So I did put another strip, a small 4-inch strip there. But if I put this mask to my face right now and breathe, it will literally suck to my face. So that would be a good test to say, hey, this is a good seal. If you feel air kind of coming around the sides or it's not sealing, then you can try and massage the mask and make it fit better. A couple things. This weather stripping comes with an adhesive already on it, which is great. The adhesive seems pretty robust when it's on the actual just paper plate itself. But anytime that it was folded over or put over something with glue, it didn't really have a good fit. So I'd recommend don't go all this way and go cheap with hot glue now. Take the hot glue and put it back. Put some tacks down and put it back in place. I also put hot glue at the end and some of the corners. So if I'm going to wear this mask, this is exactly what it's going to look like. I want that full ring. I want to make sure that there's no air going past the nose to my eyes, and I want to put some hot glue either all the way around if you have a lot of it, or at least at those pinch points. So again, this is a little more developed mask. It's got the seal now. This by itself, I would be comfortable wearing. Again, I had mentioned, that this inner membrane. I had worn this mask prototype with this thick wound bandage for 20 minutes, and I was just sitting down. I had very little problem breathing. Once I started working out, really quickly did it become difficult to breathe through this. So again, this isn't meant to be the end-all be-all only example. This is just meant to give you an idea. I think a piece of felt would work. Just regular gauze. Just things to think about. The other thing that I did that I'm going to tell you about in the first video, I said I had this bandage and I cut it in half. Well, I cut it in half and all these little fibers start falling off and inhaling them. So whatever you do, make sure you're not you're trying to solve one problem but creating another. So let's go ahead and talk about the shield. And I mentioned the Solo Cup. So what you're going to want to do with the Solo Cup, cut the bottom off, cut it up the middle, and cut your outer ring off. So let me just show you that. So cut the bottom off, take your scissors, cut up the middle, and then you're going to want to pull that, cut that outer ring off and pull it off. That's going to be too much pressure. You need this thing off. And you're going to have to mess around with this, but how you're going to secure it to the mask. Again, this is just one way. If you have a better way, please provide a comment. Whereas you put some hot glue. What I'd recommend is putting a generous amount in the center and going out about an inch on each side, so about 2 inches center line, and just hold it in place until that glue dries. I'd also recommend wearing, gardening gloves or some kind of gloves doing this. After you make about the 5th mask, that hot glue starts to, burn you. And people are dying of respiratory failure right now, and poor me, I have a boo-boo. But if you're making a bunch of these masks, you'll see what I mean, and gloves make a little bit of a difference. Once that center glue is cured and in place, you're going to go ahead and put a bead of glue all the way down, all the way to the edge, and again, hold it in place all the way down until it dries. And once again, use staples. Staples are cheap and plentiful right now, so throw a couple staples in. That cup is going to continually want to coil up back to its normal shape. So put some staples to help hold it in place, and now you can see how it's come together. It may not be pretty. It's not symmetrical. This one's not anyway, but it's a mask with a filter. And it's a face shield from Household Goods. Now let me show you just how to tie it off. I took a 44-inch piece of this thick yarn that they use for making blankets. I put a knot in the middle, and then I simply just stapled it to right about the center line of that mask where the shield meets the mask. And this is kind of self-explanatory. You're going to have a tie, two different tie downs, top and bottom, and then you'll have a mirrored tie down on the side. So you can imagine someone wrapping this around the top of the head and the base of their head and tying it off. Now, while I'm here, let me just show you a couple options. When I was figuring out how to make this seal work, I originally I cut up a sponge from Costco, just an everyday kitchen sponge. I just sliced it up into pieces and hot glued it in place, because that's kind of similar to what a normal N95 mask has. They just have a little sponge piece. And then I realized I had some other material, and I use this is called a gap filler. If you're doing a construction project for a window and you want to fill up a gap, you can just shove this stuff in there. It's a little bit of insulation, and you don't have to use as much sealant when you seal that area off. So hardware stores sell this in 3/8, half-inch, 5/8 thicknesses. It's very cheap. I cut it down the middle with a razor blade, and again, I hot glued it on this mask. This one just shows you the two different options. I would not use the sponge if I had the gap filler, and I wouldn't use the gap filler if I didn't have the weather stripping. So again, this is just giving you some options of how this comes together. Now let's talk about some options here. Again, I think I've said it about 15 times. This is just one example of how to do it. It's introducing a concept. It's not clinically tested or proven. This is meant to be used as a latch ditch effort that's one step above nothing or a bandana. Now, one thing, let me go ahead and show you this. I call this a speed template. As opposed to taking the time of getting a ruler and making all your marks on every single plate, I made this template where I can literally, put some, if you can't really see it, but I put some slits, that correspond to those critical measurements. And then when you put it over an empty paper plate, you can have just quick reference points. So here's going to be the pattern for your holes. Here's the line you're going to cut, and there's your 730 and your 430 reference. So you can rapidly produce these plates. Same thing for that curvy line on the side. Again, this does not have to be precise in any way. The other thing with this, as far as efficiencies, is if you make a bunch of these with the speed template, and you cut your 12 o'clock slice, you can have a stack of these plates, 20 or 30 thick. Line them up so all your cuts are aligned. Take a household drill, and you can drill all those holes at once. So you can make the holes for 25 or 30 plates all at once. So real big efficiencies. Now, another thing I want to point out is that you can see here that's medium and small. The more that you rotate this cup or this plate towards the 6 o'clock line, the smaller it gets. So if you have a small face, go rotate closer to that 6 o'clock mark. If you have a big face, rotate more towards the 9 o'clock and the 3 o'clock position. If you have a gigantic head and face and this is just too small for you, use a 10.5-inch plate. I mean, you're going to have to be creative and see what's out there. The point is, this is a concept that you're making reference points. They're quick reference points where you can just make a quick pencil mark. So when you make your cuts, these plates can be folded together quickly. So before you do something like this, make sure you really have a good template working for you. I wanted to talk about some other enhancements. Now, this is something that I just saw on YouTube yesterday. So this is a normal commercially available N95 mask. And I mentioned that my concept is just a concept. I don't know what level of protection it is. But one thing I saw on TV yesterday is that people out in the country, I'm not the only one trying to solve this problem. A lot of people are. And there's some people that are 3D printing N95 masks that can be washed out and reusable. And basically, they're taking an N95, cutting a small square, and that's the filter for that 3D printed mask. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea. If you can experiment, I haven't done this yet. I'm just going to show you the concept. Experiment with cutting, a strip of this mask and putting it on your inlet and outlet for your air, and you're just going to glue it down. Make sure it's full closure, for gluing. And you may not even need any other filter media. That is the N95 rated material. Something to think about, before you start cutting up these masks that are in critical demand, do a couple templates and use some note cards or something as a example to chop up, because you're going to go through several. But people are saying that you can get, anywhere from 10 to 15 of those 3D printed masks filters out of one of these. So if you have 10 masks and you're able to get 10, pieces out of it that give you 10, similar levels of protection, you just increased your supply to 100. So if I was going to make this mask, I am making this mask. If I was going to wear this mask, my next project is to go ahead and use the N95 material, find a way to put that in place, and go from there. So again, just introducing concepts. What I would still do is probably use this loose gauze just to help form that cavity so it doesn't collapse on itself. I don't think I would use as much. Right now, I was using about a 4x4 square, and it's folded about 4 or 5 times. Again, that may be too much. Everyone has a different lung capacity. I may be able to sit here all day and breathe through this, and the next person will feel like they're suffocating within minutes. So you really need to mess around with whatever filter you're going to use, and try and custom develop it for yourself. Let me go ahead and talk about some vulnerabilities. Originally I had mentioned making these masks and giving them to hospitals, and I mentioned that the hospitals aren't even taking these things. From what I heard, they're declining them, and that's why I suggested work with someone who may need them, give it to them, let them choose to use it for liability reasons. Let's say someone makes these and they have the coronavirus, and now they're making these masks and contaminating it. Now, a couple things with that. What I went to, as opposed to using that thick bandage that I cut in half, just a normal 4x4 inch gauze bandage. And I will give this with the mask so that the person who gets it, if I don't know them, they open it, they put it in. It's just one less level of not spreading contamination. Also, these masks, these paper plates are moisture resistant. Like when you take a paper plate at a picnic and you put a big pile of spaghetti on it, it doesn't immediately saturate. You're going to have some time where something wet can be on this and not absorb. So I would recommend taking alcohol wipes or Clorox wipes, wiping these things out, inside and out before you put them on. Again, there's things to think about, but I do understand that the hospitals are not accepting these things right now. But I also think that if they don't have anything, something's better than nothing. And again, understand the risk going into this, and understand that I'm not a professional mask maker. This is just talking about things that help solve this critical problem. Another vulnerability is quality control. Just because I can wear this mask and it literally sucks to my face when I breathe doesn't mean it's going to happen for the next person. So again, get something that works for you, trial and error, kind of customize it to yourself. If you can mass produce them, great. Again, something's better than nothing, but I'm just not sure how that's going to look in the future. Let me go over, just make sure I'm not missing anything here. If you do have a better idea, this video will be public. My first one was not. Please post it. Again, I'm out there looking to help solve this problem. It's not the only solution. I think it's all I pretty much wanted to say. Our country is in demand right now of protective equipment, and if you or a loved one are going to be put in harm's way, you should have it. It's disgusting that they don't have the proper equipment, and it doesn't affect you right now, and you're not working. Think about if you do need medical attention, you call 911 and no one's there to help you. So even though you may not be exposed to the coronavirus or deal with it, and you're at home watching reality TV or crafting, this is not just about you. It's about our country. It's about keeping our first responders and our healthcare professionals healthy, because once they go away, they're not going to be replaced quickly, and they're not going to be there when you need them. So I'd highly encourage you guys to start, looking at how you can help. Let's say someone has masks but not plates, or the cups but not the plates. Get on your social media forums and start talking. Maybe you guys can hand materials off. I mentioned in my last video that this is our generation's victory garden, and it really is. Like, we have people, healthcare providers and first responders that are putting their lives on the risk for strangers, and they don't have proper protective equipment. So we need to do our part, try and help them out, help yourself out, help your loved ones and friends who are going to be put in this situation. So I hope I didn't forget anything. If I did, well, I'll add it to a comment. Good luck. Thank you for your time.